Hi, good evening everybody. Welcome to the Expire Show brought to you by Science Centre Singapore, Singapore Institute of Technology and Neo Aeronautics. Today, we're going to talk about something necessary, I would say must have, not even say nice to have, right? We are going to talk about standards. And a lot of people who are innovators never pay attention to this because they thought of innovations. But you know, all products, all services are regulated. The governments, the agencies have to regulate it for the safety, for many purposes, for the environment or whatever. Now, how do you actually go about understanding this? No? And everybody looks at it and say, wow, it's so difficult. But there are people who actually make things easier for us. And that person is Jason, who is the CEO and the co-founder of Stendard, spelled S-T-E-N-D-A-R-D, who is working on standards, spelled S-T-A-N-D-A-R-D. All right, let's go and meet Jason. Hi, Jason.
Hi, Prof. Neil.
Great to have you,
Yep.
and we're going to talk about standards and standards.
Yes.
All right, so maybe as my style is best for you to introduce yourself. Okay,
Yep.
go ahead.
My name is Jason, CEO and co-founder of Stendard. Thank you, Prof. Neil, for this kind invitation for this talk show. So maybe I'll just start first on how we actually got acquainted. I had this very lucky opportunity some 14, 15 years ago as an undergraduate, and I had this chance to run through the NOC program in NUS, and I worked actually as an intern with one of Prof. Neil's startup, and that was back in 2008. And I want to thank him for this opportunity because it is with this opportunity that I get to understand what standards and regulation is. And really in the realms of being an undergraduate as a science student, there's almost no chance to understand this in a daily curriculum work. So with that exposure of like 6 months in understanding regulation and standards as part of a medical device company, that's how it started my knowledge, or I would say passion and interest in this space. And that's also something that, that kicks me off. And after that, even after my graduation, I also joined Singapore HSA. That's also another key stepping stone for me to get into understanding why products should be regulated in this space. And of course, that starts my career and journey in this direction. Founded Stendard back in 2016. And that was also going through quite some hoops and hurdles, trying to understand how regulation and standards can be applied to different industries, not only just in the medical devices, there is like pharmaceutical, aviation, food. So even right now, we talk about crypto, like in blockchain technologies, people are starting to talk about standards and how to regulate the space. So it's really a very huge application, looking at understanding the framework, but it is definitely applicable in the different industry, which hopefully through this session and a conversation with Prof. Neil, we can run through quite a bit of things and give you some sort of like an exposure and general understanding of what standards and qualities are about. All right, so this is myself. Again, very quickly, Stendard is a regulatory consulting and technology company. Our aim is to help businesses adopt international standards. We build processes across the organization and with the aim to bring companies to grow global. Because without standards, without standardization, you can't plug and play what is successful in your home ground to somewhere beyond that. So that is the purpose and that's the vision that we want to change in terms of mindset and thinking. I'm also part of a committee member of a working group looking at a specific industry, which is the medical device industry, helping to craft and feedback and comment on international standards within that space. And also have been quite on the side working with some enthusiasts developing different other standards and framework within associations. So again, that's like a background of myself and how I started the company. So maybe let's start with some background about why, like what Prof Neo mentioned, companies even need to think about standards. And typically, this has been always a back burner. People don't really want to talk about that, usually for a couple of reasons. It might be seen not as important to people, or it might seem too complicated that it always gets pushed back. There's always a reason, oh, I need to raise funds first, I need to look for talents, I need to look for competition edge, competitors are coming, I don't even want to, standards, I will just cast it one side. But really, regulation and compliance is something that I would just want everyone listening in here right now to really consider, have you really put some thoughts into it? But I will talk about this in greater details as we go through the slides. So maybe let's even understand why law and regulation should be put in the in place, in the first place. So we always talk about, there's a new law, there's a new regulation coming in. People tend to be a little bit more worried that there are more controls, there are more restrictions. I should be afraid. I should take a back burner. I should, avoid this topic. And is that really the reason why standards and regulations come into the picture? Right, from a governmental body, from an industry association angle, really is that when it comes to regulation, people just want to standardize how different operators and businesses come together, create the ecosystem. Yes, there are competition, but everybody should know the rules of the game clearly. So we compete fairly, we could be part of the ecosystem, and not really about trying to remove somebody out of the system. Of course, there will be people who's trying to game the whole situation, and hence these people will never last long in business, that's for sure. And from a general well-being and a general industry aspect, like even companies or individuals like a consumer, any food product that you put, that you feed yourself or like the family, I'm sure you also hope that there is some form of regulation in place. And that quality and standardization aspect takes care of that. So there are two areas. It's about giving a standard rule book, a common play, as well as ensuring consumers are well taken care of. I think these are from two areas. But we all know that startups and SMEs, the moment we talk about going out from your home ground, we are more concerned about localization, which one of the key concerns will be standardized regulations. Yeah, the government in different countries might be focusing on certain different aspects. And this becomes even more gray when business leaders don't quite understand what is the local regulation and how to navigate it. And if you are thinking about like a Southeast Asia expansion, then you imagine that there are many different nuances across the region. And that fear really truly puts people back. And this is usually the case when we speak to business leaders. It's kind of non-transparent, people are afraid, and it's time-consuming, and takes a lot of resource. So how do we overcome this? And I think that is, again, a key problem statement that we see across businesses. So, and hence, I think I will lead this conversation on why we even exist. Because I think for every company, it's important to put this very clear message out to say why we exist, to even solve a problem that perhaps any one of them could have seen this, but the understanding and the anger and to approach this from a point of how to embrace this and how to make things easier, I think that's the message we want to send on why standard even exists, because we felt that this could be a problem where it may not be as complicated. We're talking about processes, systems, like what you are doing, you just write it in a process, in a documentation. Everybody reads it. If somebody is not available for work on that day, somebody else reads the same thing, you will get the same idea on how to execute a certain role. I think that's the purpose of processes and systems. But it might be seen being made too complicated, such that in some way, I don't want to do this first, let me get the execution done first. So people start executing, but not really sort of framing out or documenting the experience down, such that there's nobody who is able to do this and repeat it somewhere else in the same way. So we hope that as part of our journey, we can, bring you through this whole entire experience, and with us, hopefully, the experience is much easier for you to, take this through the whole entire process. And hence, I will just touch on, vision. We want to ensure, we want to put quality at the center of businesses. And again, our mission is really to help people adopt international standards, build processes, and go global.
Okay.
Yep. So again, I think we also touch on the importance of quality and standards and the importance of why we exist. Maybe I will just also take another step back to really help people frame up why we talk about quality and standards, and why is it really important for companies to go global when they have this frame in mind that quality and standards adoption is important. We always talk about made in Singapore, this brand. It's truly something that I think the Singapore government is proud about. And
trust.
Yeah, trustworthy. Trustworthy as a Singapore brand, it comes from a country that has gone through thought process ensuring quality and compliance, regulations. So the Make in Singapore brand is definitely there. And when we talk about moving into overseas expansion, people typically will hear, okay, Singapore, okay, let's have a chat. I think people are more open with this conversation. And I think that is already a very good stepping stone, because with the fact that Singapore being a more limited, population, companies and industry, we know our limitations, and we should embrace that. And how do we actually then look at the rest of the world as part of our expansion plan, and how we can tap on larger talent pool, capital funds, and how do we go through this, having this experience of a local regulation, running through approvals, how do we go out of Singapore to do that and repeat? I think that's important. And hence, I want to emphasize a little bit more here that quality and standards does bring us out easier. And to tap on large markets, talent, innovation, like key points that I mentioned. And yeah, implementing standards then now is being seen as a precursor and a prerequisite to go international. And it should never be seen as something that prevents you from getting out because it's taking up a lot of time and resource. Yeah, so most of the time, startups and SMEs, especially the business leaders, might be thinking about this. I just want to get revenue. I just want to grow the team. But without an engine that works in a systematic manner, we are just trying to exhaust our energy doing something, and we can't repeat that. Yeah, so again, standardization and quality is something to be kept in mind. So again, we also face quite a bit of questions, like where do we start? Like, people will say, you start with reading some standards, some documents. I can also imagine that when you're reading that document, something that bores people, you got 10, 100 over pages. After reading one copy, you realize that I also need to look at the US version, I need to look at the European version, and this never ends. So there is always this thought process of, fear of trying to find out more information, and the more you know, the more you just want to, put it one side. So let's again start this conversation by saying that, is there a way for us to start small? Because we want to encourage people not to start this process later, but if we start now, are we able to start small? Can we start looking at maybe if you're in R&D, is there some processes that you can put together just to focus on the activity? Don't need to, let's not talk about maybe, sales and marketing. Yeah, let's perhaps not talk about commercialization, because the more you talk about putting all this information together, you get cluttered up and you don't really know where to start. So always, get things started. I think that's important. So focus on the backbone of your key processes. Yeah, and maybe, again, number 2, I said set the boundaries. Let's just focus on that and put the rest aside first, and we tackle what we call the critical areas. Then that is a stepping stone for us to understand, okay, the importance of writing down the SOPs, the processes in this area, documenting it down. And if you achieve small, everybody will be happy. And from there on, you can talk about what's next, and you just grow your processes around that. I think that's one way that we always want people to start small. Yeah. Here again, I just wanted to point out maybe some examples of documentation that some people might be thinking about. If we talk about research and development, and if you have hardware or software development, perhaps these are some examples.
But these are the things that scare people.
Yeah, and I got to just say that maybe this is just 10-20% of what we might imagine as 100%.
But then a lot of people don't work on this. So if you work on this, you are damn valuable. The salary is very high because you need people who work on this.
Yeah.
Shortage, right?
Yeah. I mean, people who try to understand this, it's like art meeting science. Yeah, because you need to read quite a bit, try to understand what the industry is looking at. But if you are an engineer or a scientist, you come from a very technical point, you might feel that there are some areas that might be irrelevant or might have distracted your time in focusing on your R&D. So I can totally imagine that having somebody who is technical to do this, or like in the sense overlapping job scope might just be a distraction to the person. But as a business owner, then you just need to think about who might be the best person to take on this pie. Again, not to drop the ball. I think that's important. Yeah. So if we see things like design development procedure, risk management, software development, these are really just examples of how you can focus on that area. We're not talking about marketing processes. We're not talking about sales yet. Yeah. So these are things that we can always try to explore first. Yep. And just maybe walk through kind of like a customer journey. Imagine if you're a company looking at standardization for the first time, what is the end goal? Yeah, I think the end goal is important because somebody might just say, if I'm certified, I have this certificate stuck on my wall and it's done. So, it is usually not the case. People need to continuously maintain that certificate on the wall, and that's how you maintain the processes, upkeep this. It's a continuous effort and energy to maintain this. But maybe just let me walk you through the journey. It always starts with writing what we call a rule book. Document what you do and do what you document. So it's as simple as that. A rule book that governs the different teammates, what you are doing, so somebody else understands as well. Yeah. And then there's a training. There's always people who professionally does this, coming to train and let you understand what the concept is all about and what you are doing, why you are doing this. And then you go through an audit process, you get certified, you're happy, definitely, it's a key milestone that you get certified. But after that, like I mentioned, it's always a continuous improvement, maintenance of the process. There's a yearly audit, and you get into the different countries, there's always approval of a product. So these are things that has to be repeated and ongoing. Yeah, so again, the end goal is always iterating, but you know that the objective is to place product out into the market. And of course, that drives your sales, your revenue. So not the other way around. Okay. Yep. So maybe I'll just share very quickly how we work with some of the customers in this space and how we walk through them in this journey. Like I mentioned just now in the earlier slides, we are a regulatory consulting, but we're also a technology company, which means that we actually have our own software. We call it Stendard Solution. It's a fundamental platform and software that we use as a firm, as well as companies will adopt that as a system for them to maintain their processes easily. So that is a core feature, I would say, platform that we have. Adding to that, we have our academy, which we have lots of e-learning modules up on the platform as well. And we focus our energy quite a bit through our services, our consulting services to our clients. But the way we are different, again, here is that we deliver our services through our platform. So during the COVID days, during the lockdown where we can't meet, things function as per normal for us. Our international clients get the same service from us as well. So these are things on how we think about innovation, technology, and how to implement that in a field that traditionally is all very manual. Consultants use paper, have to visit the companies face to face. So these are things that we are continuously looking at how to overcome and how to move that process, making things easier for people. Yep. So again, maybe some details about the suite of services that we cover. Maybe I'll just focus a little bit more on the solution portion here in terms of technology. We have an algorithm that help companies easily generate the documents, prepare them through a set of questionnaires that we guide them through on the platform. So it's like a brain by itself. It's like Q&A running through. And after that, once you complete that whole process, you're able to prepare and generate a set of documents that you are able to then review and take on to the next steps of iteration. And that's where we also guide you to focus which are the processes you should take care of first. So these are things that we do quite a bit with our clients. So again, the innovation portion is quite a bit on the software as part of our engine to deliver our service. Yeah. So of course, the rest of the services, I probably don't want to bore you and run through some of these things. But in general, our focus is to help you get up to speed to adopt standards and set up proper processes. Just some local and international companies that we serve: logistics, healthcare, platforms, software. Quite a bit also in the traditional manufacturing space. Yeah, you can see we also work quite a bit with institutions like NUS, some VC firms. So a wide variety of SME, startups, and listed companies, MNC. So these are things that we continuously look at in terms of getting our products out to market. Yeah, I think this session for me is really to kind of introduce what quality and standards is all about. And of course, for me, really, the COVID has really changed the situation where, when we look at pre-COVID times, the pre-pandemic times, there's always quite a bit of resistance in terms of, technology helping me to streamline my process. Oh, it's okay, I know, I can wait, I can still do things manually, I can still fly to my regional office, I can still get things done and sign. But we really see this drive, easily pushing this through the last 2 years. And I got to say that we will never be going back to pre-pandemic, and that companies really need to think about how this framing up of processes and systems is key for them to continuously communicate with people, not only just based in the same country, but internationally as well. So again, this is a key focus, and I hope that as part of this conversation and my short presentation here, I'm happy to leave questions next. But here as a take home, let's look at this as a journey for us to move forward in terms of adopting processes, not just as a back burner, but something that drives you to grow a company.
All right, thank you, Jason. And if you have questions, keep your question coming. But I have lots of questions for Jason, because since I last met him as an undergrad interning in my company, actually we do rotate you, not just in quality, right? Also in product development. So let you have a feel of the various stages of various departments that we have in a startup medical company. But you mentioned something very interesting, right? Because during internship, and after that, it probably sparked your interest, and then work in the Health Science Authority, HSA, right? The reason that you embark on to start this company must be you spot an opportunity, right? Or when you are interning under me, you'll find that actually there's certain problem that you're facing every day during regulation, and say, okay, there's a problem. Then is there an opportunity? Is there a thought process somewhere?
Yep, definitely. So when, as part of the internship, it's really, it's an eye-opener, it's an exposure. And when I start working with the rest of the team as part of the internship program, then I realized that even as I start speaking with my peers, or even ask friends from the other cohort, then I realized that this sounds like we can't get this information or education from the university days. Yeah. And this immediately gave me a thought that is there a lack of supply in the ability to help companies overcome this idea of the importance of standardization. Yeah. And of course, when I am from a regulator's point, I clearly see how companies are struggling out there, whereby they don't quite understand what is the purpose of a submission to a regulator to approve a product. They start putting in information that might not be too relevant, but trying to meet the checkbox. Yeah. So that again gives me another thought that is there an opportunity if, let's say, I were to be running this as a business, or starting as a consultant, as an individual consultant first, to even start helping different companies to overcome, and that is the starting point. When I start helping company A and B, I realize that wow, okay, there is indeed a demand in terms of such knowledge and capabilities. And when I started Stendard, again my next point is things are still very manual. Can we use some form of technology to streamline and speed up? There are small little pockets of opportunity as you go. Then you realize that is there a way to do better?
I think, okay, I want to have a learning point here, right? It's very interesting. We learn about design thinking, right, with the customer journey, and then we say, hey, where are the pain points? The interesting things is about when you are doing internship, most of the times you have probably a lot of times to observe and to shadow people and go through the process. Actually, you can document it as a customer journey, whether it's a process or whatever. And you always find that there are pain points everywhere, which the guys who are doing it got no time to think about it. Yeah. But if you think about it and say, this is a problem to be solved, then you find yourself an opportunity. So for example, like PetSnap, right, or Jeffrey Tiong, right? Yeah. He went to Silicon Valley and he was supposed to work on the patterns and say, oh, I cannot find the information and cannot find the information. Then he came back, he decided, let me automate this stuff. And then finally, we don't need to retell the story, right? It is PetSnap, one of the most innovative company, and of course, I think the interesting thing you probably want to know is that it's a unicorn. Right? Maybe you will be one. So treat your internship not as just to learn, right? But it's also as an opportunity for to churn the new ideas or the new companies or a new product, right? Go beyond just internship. Look for opportunities. That's one good learning point. Now, let's then talk about standards, okay? In certain industries, we have this thing called self-declaration. Okay. A lot of people are like, suka-suka, I declare my product is certified. What do you mean by that?
Okay, in certain industry, and also
especially electronics.
Okay, yeah. There is always this conversation between being pro-enterprise and, of course, setting regulations. Yeah, I think as regulators, the challenge is always to put some sort of a framework in order to control people, or I would say allow serious players to come in, but people who are trying to come in for a cheap shot then will not be able to clearly enter the market because they can't provide certain documentation or evidence that their product indeed meet the requirements. So self-declaration is typically governing products or components that might not be a critical portion to a final product or a final, let's say, food, for example. It could be a control to an ingredient. So what actually happened is self-declaration would mean that the government has put together certain requirements and criteria, and that as a business, as long as I look at it and I can check box this,
you just tick, right?
I will develop a declaration that I conform to this. Of course, there's always a situation if the conformity is not there, and then I'm just trying to submit an application to get it through. So of course, there would be enforcement if things doesn't work out.
If things go haywire,
right?
right? Yeah,
but again, I think self-declaration is there for lower risk products and to allow businesses to,
So it's a matter of risk.
Yeah.
So if the lesser risk, it's the onus of the product owner to self-declare.
Correct.
Right? So it's certain, especially electronics, right? So like a gadget, tendency is self-declared.
Alright.
EMI, EMC, if you do not know what it is, doesn't matter. All right. But things like risky product,
Yep.
right? Or things that impact life, right? For example, medical, and we do a lot in medical. If you don't know standards and you start building a product, you can't sell, right? So from day one, what happened? What do you need to do?
Yep. So again, I think regardless of industry, we know we can talk about food aviation, you know, the space that you are in, or like medical. Your example here is to understand the different nuances of the market that you're getting in terms of regulation. And I think that's the first thing that should be, you know, falling into place first. People try to develop a product and then scramble later on when they suddenly read that there's certain requirements that they need to fulfill. And typically it's too late and too costly. Yeah, so it's important to start putting in as your design thinking that regulation will come at the end goal. How do I start thinking about it right now? Yeah, I think you correctly pointed out this point.
Yeah. Now we talk about quality and the setting up of a standard committee. You sit on a standard committee, right? I also used to sit on a standard committee, and the interesting thing is that when we are trying to build a product, that was the wearable dialysis kidney, right? There's actually no standards in this area. There's a past product, but nobody has actually defined the standards. And the nearest thing is a machine. It's like a dialysis machine called the MT60. And that was set by the Americans and the Europeans. And then we got problem because we now have a product that has no standards. So what we did, and what I did was, we went to the Singapore Standard Council, right? And which is run by Spring, then now it's called Enterprise Singapore, and we request to set up standard. So when we request to set up standard, and they say, hey, there's nothing that's covered here, so we set up a committee, we start writing, but actually it's not that easy to write, but the important thing is that once you have a local committee, you can now sit on the international committee, which is very important, because if you don't have a local committee, you cannot sit in the international committee, and there's all this observer participation status. But once you sit in the international committee, then you start getting to know the people in the committee, because these are the people who is going to vote for whether your standard become international. So it's not just standard, it is a business thing. If you don't push your standard into the international standard, other countries cannot use. If you push your design becomes a local standard and push it into the international standard, then every country will use your standard to run. And that's what we did, right? We went to the international committee, we get it accepted as the IEC standard. We go to US, get it into the what called the AAII, something like that, or AAAI, the American Instrumentation, whatever. Yep. So once they accept the standards, suddenly our thing can go international. So therefore, it is actually sometimes very important that standard setting is also a strategy. It's not just a process. It is also a business strategy, and I think that is very important, right? And look at the handphone, from 2G to 3G, right? Which is from GSM, CDMA to wideband CDMA. And the standard setting process was so intense that eventually CDMA wins, right? But CDMA is owned by an American company, so it's patent. So when it wins, everybody has to pay royalties to that guy, right? Well, the GSM just disappear. See, it is a business game, not just a quality game. Yeah, so sometimes you have to factor this into the thing. And I think in Singapore, when we are coming out with a lot of innovations, we should eventually think about participating in standard setting committee.
I think this is definitely true, and coming from a government agency point, I actually do also see the importance of how regulators should be always continuously in touch with innovators, because that's always where new ideas gel. And from a regulator's point, there must be always this conversation and thought process to understand what are the latest trend and how these might approach, companies might approach eventually to agency to look at how regulation framework can be set up in Singapore. And this continuously remains a struggle, especially from a startup founder myself. I know getting acceptance in terms of evidence that certain things is important and being a champion of this for the first time is sometimes facing quite a bit of resistance. So again, I think with the Singapore ecosystem, it's not about just innovators, really with agency, government, officers, trying to understand why this innovation is going to be the next thing and how we should actually embrace it and help companies to bring out into the international stage. I think it's way more important.
So crypto is moving, then we must set some standard for it. And then we become the international standard for cryptos.
Yeah, I think, again, Singapore wants to be a crypto hub, right?
Yeah.
And that also means that there will be lots of players coming in, either infrastructure players or the key Web3 developers. But again, embracing it, trying to understand the concept, it also means that the regulators must be able to think about the innovators' angle and really put the shoes in and see how, collectively this can be going into the international stage.
Okay, let's move away a little bit from standards, right? Let's move on entrepreneurship, right? So what makes you leave HSA cushy job to start a company?
Again, I mentioned just now about opportunity. Yeah, I think, being an entrepreneur is really about spotting an opportunity and figuring out ways to achieve that end goal. And of course, along the way, things will change, environment changes, opportunity might tweak and change as well. So that continuous curiousness and trying to identify and tweak along the way, I think is what drives me quite a bit. Because it's never, like you mentioned, the cushy job is always standard. You kind of do what you are always doing, not really thinking about opportunity that you can also solve as a person. And for me, I see this opportunity, and I think that, again, it's not about just myself trying to solve the problem. You need to rally a team to come together, which garner your support, and also agree on a vision that it truly will impact what you want to achieve. And I think that is what is important, because as an entrepreneur, you cannot be always alone. And that is like a solopreneur, it's not an entrepreneur. You're not creating an enterprise that runs on its own. So being an entrepreneur means that you need to not only solve a problem that you're trying to, but at the same time, you need to build out a sustainable team. Okay. That one day, if you are no longer there, that team is still trying to fulfill your vision that you have set.
Let's talk about team, right? And there's two perspectives to it. One is building the team from your founding time is at 2% to now 20, right? So that is part, building the team. The second perspective is building the business from local to regional, right? So maybe you can tackle the first question part. Building from 2 to 20, what's the difference and how you actually manage, right? Managing 5% versus managing 20 people. And even worse is cross-country, right? Yeah.
Yeah, okay. I started a business with Vincent, who is the CTO of Stendard. He's also my brother. So, 2% is always easy. We can sit down together, get a coffee, we write down some notes, and that is like the process.
Because I can telepathic to you, right? Yeah.
And things just have to be done. It's either you or me. Yeah, just two parties. But as you start growing the team, 3 and 4, okay, maybe you can still do that. Sit down together, write some notes, and just get it done. But the moment you feel that, okay, you have a team that takes on different functions, and communication is not on a day-to-day basis, especially with COVID. And like you mentioned, we also had our first hire that is not based in Singapore. So then communication becomes very important. It also means that whatever processes or notes, you can call it simply notes, it has to be somewhere that everybody can access. What you have done today, what you're going to do next, what are the things you're going to do in the next 6 months, it has to be clearly articulated. And I think The challenge from 2 to 20 is about articulating the vision and the execution that is being spread across the different teammates. And that articulation and communication is key. It's difficult, but it has to be done, and we make a conscious effort that every morning we will speak with the different team leaders, understand what they are going to do today, and it could be just a short 10-15 minutes, but there's an effort that we all put in together. So that's growing from 2 to 20. Cross-border, I think it has been made easier because of COVID. People already accept the fact that through a Zoom call or team call, things should be done. Yeah, and even before COVID, our teams are already in Indonesia. So we already have to go through this process of communicating through online platforms. So again, I think it's that openness and embracing technology. No longer a distance anymore. Yeah, as long as you are open in terms of getting certain things communicated and discussed through Zoom, get things done through that way in a digital manner, I think that's probably what we are focusing on.
Okay.
Yep.
So there's a question here. It's about blockchain.
Wow, okay, hopefully I can answer that.
All right, so hi, I was wondering about blockchain and whether or not regulatory processes are hindering innovations in that sector, especially in current situation when government are removing all the blockchain ATM and whatever.
Okay, this is always the challenge of innovation. Because innovative products tend to sometimes be on a gray zone, whereby protecting consumer is where the regulators is concerned about.
Right.
So, but innovation in some way requires some sort of acceptance over a period of time. And that if you're not an early adopter, typically you might be somebody who is trying to push this away. And what makes things worse is when there are situations of scammers. People are trying to come in to do a fast job and leave and tarnish this image that feels like this innovation here is not going to be sustainable. So I think that further complicates the situation. And hence, at some point, the regulators, what I'm seeing is tightening first before loosening is what the approach is. Because if the primary priority is to take care of consumers, then the moment you tighten it, of course, businesses will be restricted, but the idea is that consumer first, right? So, of course, I do think that the next step could be a fruitful conversation must come through between the regulators, here I mean MAS, with perhaps the Blockchain Association. I'm sure this recent news come together, yep. There must be fruitful conversation.
Yeah, I think the Singapore regulatory agencies are actually quite forward-looking. But if you look at overseas agencies, they see themselves regulator. Singapore regulators sometimes also becomes industry promoters. So you have MAS, you have the regulation section, then you have innovation, they have Chief FinTech Innovation Officer. So sometimes you have regulator and promoter in the same agency or regulatory. Sometimes I don't know what. Because one guy says, I want to regulate. The other guy says, I want to promote. Relax. No. We tighten. So it's actually quite difficult for them. But we're quite forthcoming. But I have actually come across regulators now who actually wear both hats at the same time. Then he will say, so we have this session. Oh, we like to promote industries. Please come out with innovations. And then the next topic he say, by the way, we don't believe in mutual recognition. What's a mutual recognition? If you certify here, you can sell there, right? That country also accepts. So mutually accepted your certified product. Yeah. So if you are recognized here, you sell there. We don't want to do that. I say, why? Because if you do that, then if anything happens, then how? So you can certify some in some country and straight away you sell here. Then if there's a risk, then what do? I want control, right? Obviously. Then, the oxymoron here?
Yep.
You want, so it's recognized there, you don't want, you still want to control here, so there's no mutual recognition. But if you want to promote the industry here, I build here, I want you to maturely recognize so I can sell there. I don't need to do 2 times, you see?
Yep.
And they somehow don't understand. When they are regulator, they put a regulator hat. When they're promoter, they put a promoter hat, and then say, see, I do it very well. And I was like, yeah, but it's oxymoron.
And so it's still best to have 2 different individuals rather than one
sometimes
person.
it's actually very, very difficult for them. So I think those are the issues in life that you have to deal with. Yeah. Okay, next question is this. Thanks for the talk. Did you have other ideas before starting Stendard? Did you explore other things first and say, you know, you pull your brother into Stendard, right? So it must be a damn big decision.
Before that,
Yeah.
of course, you know, back in the days of the NOC days, we run through a lot of programs. Yes. Besides the internship itself, we got coursework, and coursework requires us to also put together some other teammates, think about an idea that within a couple of months we must be able to put up a business plan and to kind of pitch and validate the ideas across whether it makes sense or not. So I think there are always this continuous search on what is the next thing. And you know, again, Stendard didn't come since day one. The fact is that with what we are doing as trying to solve the problem of helping companies to adopt standards, it can be done in all traditional methods. Like, you know, like I mentioned just now, you can visit a company, understand what they need to do, what are processes that needs to be set up, and you just prepare the information accordingly from scratch. That can be done. But the fact is that the search then again is what is the next thing of how to make this experience better. Perhaps for us right now is again, what are we going to think about technologically that can further enhance the idea of this? Can blockchain further power Stendard forward? Ensuring that certification is always being validated. Can a cert be fake?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah. So again, I think it wasn't the first idea for sure, but there were many different ideas along the way which perhaps are really not the most important thing to put forward, because those mainly are project ideas, things that could be, 10 years ago, can Wi-Fi be inside every MRT train? Ideas that we think perhaps couldn't really work out technologically, but now, you know, it can be done in train stations and stuff. So these are things that, yeah.
I ask you a final question, right? So you know that standards are for the real world. We will now have Metaverse. Okay. So will standards still apply in the virtual world?
Okay.
Maybe there's a great business opportunity.
Yeah. Maybe in that sense, Metaverse would then come with some form of infrastructure to support this Metaverse on its own, right? And how Metaverse will eventually evolve, I think is also something everybody innovators are trying to put that picture, but how it really will turn out, you know, only time will tell. And then I think as the infrastructure itself, I'm sure there will be many different players that needs to be itself fulfilling a certain quality and standards in order to make this happen. And to continuously make that happen, I think again that is where we talk about continuously innovating even on the standards point. And of course on the Metaverse, how people are interacting, again I'm sure there will be fraud, there will be situations where people are trying to hack the system. So the answer is yes. I'm very sure standards will be applicable. It's just in the form, how it's being enforced. Are regulators or country able to control what's happening on the Metaverse? But again, these are very interesting topics.
Yeah, but it's no man's land, right? It's the Wild Wild West. It's for you to then, you run your own hackathons and then figure out whether there's great opportunity. But at least there's new space to explore. Last question here. I think this is from an MBA student. What is the pricing model you adopt when providing your service, and what is the thought behind it? Basically say, how do you price? Don't need to mention the amount if you don't want to, but actually, how do you price service? Mainly the platform, right? Platform is also a service, consulting and whatever.
Pricing is always challenging because especially when you go into different markets, prices, then we got to identify what is the local pricing. And sometimes, to be frank, the challenge is about standardizing the pricing across the board. And always people think about how to keep your revenue recurring. For most of the consulting work, people like to think about it as a one-time, because to be frank, I engage a consultant to come in for a period of time. After that, yeah, thank you very much. If I need your help, I'll let you know. So usually pricing model of consulting activities is still a one-time fee.
It's a one-time, it's a headcount base, man-hour base.
Correct, correct. So for us, when it comes to the implementation of the technology, then it's a hybrid. You see that people are still more in tune in paying a one-time fee because I'm engaging you as a service to come in. Whether or not you have a technology, I think that's a second conversation that I will have with you. But yes, if you tell me this is the fee, I will go and find some other consultants to get some comparative quotes to look at that. But I think what is interesting after that is that we are using technology to help you to maintain the processes. And that's where the idea of a recurring activity, low cost enough for you to save up headcounts to maintain the activities. And from a pricing point, there is a one-time and it moves into a recurring.
Yeah, so from the, let's say, the quality manager point or whoever is in charge of this, right? When you first do engagement, probably is competitive pricing. People provide this service for certification, manual method. You provide computer method or online method. That's the price, right? That's people compete against each other. But after that, then they may have to maintain 2 or 3 headcounts to maintain. And then if you use a system, do I just need half a headcount, 1 headcount? And I think that is a really simple decision to make, right? All based on cost-benefit analysis.
Correct. Yeah. And of course, things like online training, which probably people wasn't quite receptive, again, before the pre-pandemic days, are now very open with online training. I can just sign up for a course, send my team there, 2 hours at their free time. If this guy wants to do it at 12 a.m., it's fine. You complete the course, you get a cert. Then now I'm having a conversation with you to check whether you really run through that training. So it's flexible, it's easy, and I think this then again, it's a mindset change of how people perceive a very tough industry, or I would say a industry that is very hard to understand in terms of knowledge, to something that's being simplified.
Good. Thank you. I think we have a good discussion, not just on the standards and the importance of standards for the industry or whoever is innovators or entrepreneurs, but also go through the process or the thought process, and we cover pricing model, but also how to look for opportunity. I think for people who are stepping into the industry, having internship, I think the takeaway is actually quite powerful. Don't just intern, look for opportunities at the same time. All right, and based on that, thank you, Jason, and we'll see you next week.
See you, thank you.